I never thought a group text could feel like a slap in the face. Don't forget, mom's in charge of the kids, table smile, the message read. I had to reread it twice. Not just because it was so casually cruel, but because my son, Jamal, had hearted it like it was the sweetest thing. And Tasha, my soon-to-be daughter-in-law, had replied underneath, "Oh good, we don't need to hire a sitter." I stared at my phone, hand trembling slightly, coffee bubbling over behind me on the stove. I didn't even move to turn the stove off, just stood there in my kitchen in Silver Spring, stunned. The group chat included Tasha's bridesmaids, her mom, her cousin Kai, and me. Mom. Like I was the help. Like I hadn't just wired them $2,500 last month for their venue deposit. Like I hadn't been the one who helped them get their finances in order after Tasha's contract gig ended in December. Like I hadn't been the one folding Jamal's baby clothes alone when he was 6 months old because his father never came home. I scrolled back up the thread, rereading that cheery pastel font message. Don't forget, mom's in charge of the kids, table smile. I took a screenshot. Not because I didn't believe what I'd just read, but because I knew I'd need to see it later, to prove it to myself that I hadn't overreacted, that I hadn't made it up. A babysitter. That's what I was to them. My mind flicked to the wedding budget spreadsheet I'd seen back in January when they asked for input. It had a line for a cigar bar, $2,800, a premium dessert table, $1,450, even valet parking, but not a cent allocated for childcare. I opened the Excel file I'd saved back then. No sitter listed, just miscellaneous support, TBD, a vague $250 line. That was me. I was the TBD. I looked down at the still boiling pot, the hiss of water hitting the burner, finally breaking my trance. I reached over and clicked the stove off with a hard jab. In all the wedding planning noise, I'd never once been asked what color I wanted to wear, what table I'd be seated at, whether I'd be in the family photos. Just a yellow smiley face next to kids' table. And Jamal, my Jamal, had just clicked a little heart 1 week before the wedding. That was the moment everything changed. The next morning, I turned off the stove before the water could even heat. I couldn't stomach coffee. My hands found their way to the box by the coat closet, the one where I'd stashed my silver pumps, wedding shoes I'd ordered on sale back in January. I sat down with them on the couch, clutching them like they might offer answers. Patent leather, soft inner lining, small heel, dignified, not flashy, like me. I hadn't heard from Jamal or Tasha since that group message. No phone call, no check-in, not even a polite thank you for the transfer. I had RSVP'd weeks ago, a hand-addressed envelope with cursive loops like my mother taught me. Folded inside had been a registry card directing me to a website where they'd listed everything from a $1,000 espresso machine to a $180 bamboo changing table. Nothing personal, no handwritten notes, no can't wait to celebrate with you. Just commerce. The shoes sat in my lap like a joke. I'd bought them the same day I transferred $2,500 for their venue deposit. That was the phrase they used. Tasha had sent a brief message that afternoon. Hey, MST, we're short for the first payment on the venue. Any chance you can help? No apology for the short notice, no clarity on the terms, just a screenshot of a payment screen with a due date and a balance. I'd gone to the bank the same day. And now I was the babysitter. Outside my condo on Colesville Road, the trees had just started to bloom. I used to love this time of year, when the city softened and the air smelled like possibility. But now even the dogwood blossoms looked brittle to me. I opened my email and scrolled through the string of baby registry updates from Tasha. She sent one every week. Only 40 items left! New additions Jamal and I love. Not once had they asked what I thought. Not about baby names or themes or even what stroller brands I'd used when Jamal was a baby. I was good enough to host their packages when they missed deliveries. Good enough to store the crib they didn't have room for yet. Used. That's the word. Not ignored, not overlooked. Used. I wasn't part of their circle. I was a service provider wrapped in family clothing. I looked at the wedding shoes one last time, then slid them back into the box. No one had asked if I was excited. No one even noticed I'd been quiet. 3 weeks before the wedding, I'd been standing on my back porch, folding linen napkins from the last family brunch I hosted. The early March sun was soft that day, dappling the wood floor with gold through the maple branches. I'd spent the morning reorganizing the pantry and double-checking my calendar. An old-school planner with handwritten notes and post-its marking venue tours and bridal expos. Each little star beside an event was something I'd helped coordinate, attended, or paid for. Last summer, I spent 2 full weekends driving Tasha across the DMV, sweating in church dresses while she toured venues in Bowie, Potomac, and down to Mount Vernon. "I just want something timeless but luxe," she'd said, as we walked across the gravel path of a restored estate with wraparound columns. She'd clutched my arm then, leaned her head toward mine. "You're the only one who gets what I mean." Back then, she treated me like I was part of the dream team. I had a folder of notes from those visits, cost breakdowns, photos of centerpieces, a stack of glossy brochures. Somewhere in my phone, I still had a picture of us smiling in front of a ballroom mirror, her arms around my shoulders like I was her own mother. She posted that one to her Instagram story with a glittery caption, "Venue scouting with my favorite lady, red heart sparkles." I hadn't seen her post anything close to that about me since. By October, she'd stopped looping me in. First it was small, decisions made without updates. Then it was big, whole venue selected without my input. She said it was because things were moving fast. But I watched her tag her cousin Kai and her coworker Brianna in photos from the tasting. Not me. I got a photo dump 2 days later with no caption, just, "Venue's locked in!" No emoji this time. Janine, my stylist from down at Gallery Salon, caught me sighing into my lap the last time she pressed my hair. "You're more excited than the bride," she'd said, glancing at my nails. "You know that, right?" I gave her a sad little smile in the mirror. I couldn't admit out loud what I was starting to feel, that maybe Tasha had never really meant to keep me close. Maybe I'd just been a useful prop. And now that the wedding was in motion, they had no more use for me than for those extra napkins I was folding. Discardable. Like linens after a party. That night, I sat by the fireplace, the one I hadn't used since Jamal was in college. The mantel still held the same framed photos. Jamal at his high school graduation, his cap slightly crooked from the way he always fidgeted with the tassel. Him in a t-ball uniform, squinting into the sun with a bat too big for his body. There was one of just the two of us at a museum in Philadelphia. Both smiling, both tired from walking too long but still happy. I hadn't moved those photos in years. Raising Jamal on my own wasn't easy. His father, David, passed when Jamal was 7. A stroke, sudden and cruel, on a Wednesday morning. One moment he was stirring oatmeal, the next collapsed on the tile. After that, I was mother, father, nurse, tutor, disciplinarian, cheerleader. Every pediatric appointment was me signing the forms alone. Every school fundraiser, every parent-teacher conference, I was the one nodding and asking questions. I still remember the time he had strep during finals week. I stayed up 2 nights in a row testing flashcards between his doses of Tylenol. He used to tell me, "You're my day one, Mom." When he got into Howard, he hugged me so tight I thought my ribs might crack. "When I get married," he once said, around age 12, "you'll walk me down the aisle like a queen." I held on to that. Through every sacrifice, I tucked that promise deep inside. Now here I was, reading chat threads about kids, tables, and access passes, trying to pretend that betrayal didn't taste like iron in my mouth. He hadn't even asked if I wanted a corsage, hadn't confirmed if I'd be in the front row. Every interaction we had lately was logistics, wiring money, checking arrival times, forwarding RSVPs. Not once had he asked how I was feeling, whether I needed anything, whether I was looking forward to the day. Maybe he thought I didn't need to be included. Maybe, in his mind, I was already part of the furniture. I pulled out my old planner and flipped through the pages, page after page marked by tuition payments, flu shot reminders, choir recitals, college visits. Every line was a record of care, of years that shaped the man he'd become. And now, that man had forgotten the woman who shaped him. I didn't need a parade, but I deserved more than a back seat. 3 days before the wedding, I cleared the dining table and spread out my bank statements like I was prepping for an audit. The wooden surface was warm from the afternoon sun filtering through the sliding glass doors, a golden pool of light that made the paper edges glow. My calculator sat beside me, its rubber buttons worn from years of budget nights. I took a deep breath and started adding. Venmo, Zelle, direct transfers, gifts labeled as wedding support, or J&T Future Fund. It added up fast. The first was a $150 dress Tasha fell in love with but couldn't justify buying. Then $325 for a flight to Charleston for her bridal shower. I hadn't even been invited. Then came the $500 for Jamal's tux. He said the groomsmen were covering theirs, but he wanted his tailored special. I paid without blinking. I scrolled through my account history. Flights, shoes, hair appointments. An emergency dental bill Tasha said she couldn't push back. I tallied each one with a growing ache in my chest. $7,850. That's how much I'd given them in the last 9 months. Not loans. Not even formal gifts. Just money handed over in good faith. Because I believed I was supporting a family that included me. I believed I was investing in a bond. I printed out the spreadsheet, highlighted each expense, and attached notes to the side. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet. I just needed to see the numbers stacked together. Evidence that I hadn't imagined the giving. That my sense of depletion had a measurable root. Edward, my banker over at Wells Fargo, had looked up from the screen a few weeks earlier and raised an eyebrow when I sent another transfer for wedding venue half 2. He'd asked, "Are you sure you're comfortable with this?" I'd smiled then, brushed it off like I always did. But that day, something in his tone lingered. I could hear it now like a whisper under my breath. "You're giving this much?" Yes, I had. I gave because that's what mothers do when no one else steps up. But as I sat at the dining table, surrounded by receipts and evidence, the generosity no longer felt noble. It felt used, harvested, and they hadn't even sent a thank you card. Just another ask, another debit from a well they assumed would never run dry. 5 days before the wedding, I paused outside my study door when I heard Tasha's voice drifting through the cracked frame. She was on Zoom, that much was clear from the bright ring light glow bouncing off the hallway wall. I had offered the space when her laptop died mid-call, a gesture she accepted with a breezy, "You're a lifesaver, Miss T." I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I had a glass of water in one hand and a grocery list in the other. But then she laughed, a sharp, knowing laugh, and said, "It's perfect. She's basically our free childcare." My heart thudded. There was silence on the other end. Then her voice again, a little louder this time. "No, I'm serious. We don't have to hire anyone. Jamal said she's great with the little ones. Like, naturally maternal or whatever." I stepped back like I had touched a hot stove. My throat closed. In the reflection from the hallway mirror, I saw her lean into the screen, still smiling. Her lip gloss caught the light. She wasn't muted. She knew I could hear. That smirk. That casual entitlement. As if I were a reliable utility, useful, ever-present, and unpaid. She'd said it like she was describing a perk of a venue rental, not a person, not the woman who had folded her shirts and co-signed their lease. I turned, walked away slowly, and sat on the edge of my bed. My hands were shaking, water still in one, the paper list in the other, now smudged by my thumbprint. My pulse pounded in my ears. Not because of the words alone, but because of the tone. The easy cruelty. The way she'd glanced toward the door before continuing like it was a joke we were both supposed to laugh at. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I closed the bedroom door, placed the water on the nightstand, and sat in silence. Later I found the Zoom auto-recording saved to the desktop, a default setting. I watched it back with a kind of numb curiosity. There it was. Her face, her tone, the glance. All recorded, archived like a memory I hadn't asked to keep. 2 days before the wedding, I found myself sitting in the Target parking lot, the kind of place where time stretches long between tasks. I had gone in for snacks and coloring books, items I'd convinced myself were just in case the kids got bored during cocktail hour, just in case no one brought wipes or extra bibs, just in case I still mattered. The back seat of my car was filled with a bulging canvas tote, crayons, sticker books, sippy cups, and enough goldfish crackers to feed a preschool class. As I sat behind the steering wheel, receipt fluttering on the passenger seat, I pulled out my phone and called Jamal. He picked up on the second ring, sounding distracted. I could hear traffic, maybe voices in the background. "Hey, Ma, what's up?" I took a breath. I just wanted to ask. My voice wavered, but I steadied it. "Do you want me at the ceremony or with the kids?" A beat passed. Then laughter. Light, dismissive. You know you're best with kids, Mom. You always had the magic touch. Magic touch. Like I was a nanny. Like I hadn't raised him from birth through scraped knees, spelling tests, and panic attacks before college interviews. Like I hadn't worked full-time and still made it to every parent night and football game. I just want to be clear, I said, though my hands had started to tremble. If you need help, I'll be there. But I need to know what my place is. His tone softened, but not in the way that soothed. In the way people placate. Don't overthink it. It's going to be a full house. Lots of moving pieces. We just figured you'd be the best one to keep the little ones entertained. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Okay. Thanks, Ma. We really appreciate it. Click. The silence afterward was louder than his words. I sat there gripping the steering wheel like it could anchor me. My planner sat open beside me, a pen tucked in the spiral binding. I made a note in the corner of the day. Call with Jamal. Childcare confirmed. My handwriting barely looked like mine. A security guard strolled by, paused at my window, and gave me a nod. I smiled faintly and waved. After he passed, I let myself cry. The night before the wedding, I lay in bed staring at my phone screen, the blue light cutting through the dark like a spotlight on shame. My screen had gone still for most of the evening. No calls, no follow-ups. Then, at 10:13 p.m., a message lit up from Tasha. Hey, Ms. T. Just wanted to confirm access. Here's your vendor badge, smile. Attached was an image, a glossy mock-up of a plastic ID tag, the kind they hang on lanyards for florists, caterers, photographers. Across the top, it read, Event Childcare in bold block font. My name was beneath it, spelled correctly but cold, official. In place of a title or role befitting a mother of the groom was a laminated declaration. Staff. Access. Side entrance only. I stared at the image so long my eyes blurred. There it was, plain and digital, the final demotion. Not honored guest, not mother of the groom, just a function, a utility, a problem solved. They'd hired valet service for guests, a cigar bar for the groomsmen, a jazz trio for the cocktail hour, but not one licensed sitter, not even a part-time aide, just me, branded, literally, as a workaround. I clicked the image closed. The room was silent but for the hum of the heat vent kicking on. My dress, pale plum with a soft shimmer and a shawl I'd hand-stitched beads onto, was still hanging on the back of the closet door, untouched. Beside it sat the tote I had repacked earlier that afternoon. Diapers, activity pads, wipes, Band-Aids. I thought of the entrance they wanted me to use, the side alley by the trash bins, where vendors unload trunks and avoid the photographers. I imagined myself walking in that way, unnoticed, unannounced, carrying not a clutch but a canvas bag full of baby snacks. As if summoned, a vibration broke the silence. A new message. This one from Pastor Yvonne. Don't let them smallbox your grace. They know exactly what they're doing. You don't have to play along. I didn't reply right away, just stared at the screen as her words sank in. Smallbox. That was the phrase that lodged itself in my chest. They hadn't excluded me outright. They had diminished me with calculation, with language, with logistics. Not banished, boxed. My name printed on a badge. My entry circled on a diagram. My body rerouted to the service door. But Pastor was right. I didn't have to keep walking through doors I didn't choose. At 6 a.m, wedding day, I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom, already dressed. Not because I was excited, because I didn't sleep. The pale plum dress shimmered faintly under the soft light, catching on the tiny crystal beads I had stitched into the shawl's hem over 4 quiet evenings in February. My hands moved on autopilot, smoothing fabric, pinning my hair, adding a touch of mauve to my lips. I had applied makeup not with joy but with duty, like armor. Beside me on the bed sat the overstuffed canvas tote. Diapers, backup shoes, a change of clothes for 2 toddlers, paper towels, stain remover pens, juice boxes, allergy-safe snacks, a thermometer. I had even printed a coloring packet, stapled neatly, sorted by age group. I had prepared, as if for a daycare shift, not a wedding, not my son's wedding. The house was hushed. Birds outside were just beginning their morning chorus. The coffee pot remained untouched. I hadn't bothered. I stared at my reflection, sharp around the eyes, hollow at the mouth. My heart didn't flutter like it had on the day I brought Jamal home from the hospital, or when he won his first debate, or when he called me crying from freshman orientation because he missed my meatloaf. Instead, it beat like a slow drum, steady but distant. I walked to the closet and took down the wedding heels, held them for a moment, then bent and tucked them into the tote, beside the baby wipes. It felt absurd. Clothing meant for celebration, pressed against objects meant for cleaning up messes. Downstairs, I opened my phone. Tasha had posted a filtered photo of her makeup trial, captioned, "Can't wait for tomorrow. Everything's handled, 2 hearts, sparkles, #bride energy." I stared at those words. Everything's handled. I wasn't tagged. Of course I wasn't. No, can't wait to see you. No, thanks to the best mother-in-law ever. Just a public celebration of seamlessness. As if the day had been divinely orchestrated with no help, no complications, no sacrifices, no me. I zipped the tote shut, placed it by the door, and returned upstairs. In the mirror, I watched myself lower the shawl from my shoulders and carefully slide the dress off, placing it back on its hanger with hands steadier than I expected. I didn't cry. Not then. What I felt wasn't grief. It was clarity, like glass scraped clean. I had shown up prepared, with every item checked. But now I saw I had never been invited to show up as myself. At 3:45 p.m., the exact time the ceremony was set to begin, I stood barefoot on my balcony, wind brushing against my ankles. The tote was still by the door. The dress, carefully zipped, hung back in the closet where it belonged. I had put everything away with intention, not anger, not bitterness. Just done. The city moved quietly beneath me. Colesville Road hushed like it was holding its breath. I watched cars ease through the intersection below. Strangers moving toward errands and appointments that had nothing to do with me, or the spectacle unfurling miles away at the ballroom. A spectacle I had no place in. Not really. My phone vibrated against the balcony railing. I didn't flinch. I let it ring once, twice, and then clicked to voicemail. Moments later, the screen lit up with the message. "Where are you? We're about to start." It was Jamal. His voice, frantic and clipped, hit me harder than I expected. As if I had disrupted a script. As if my absence was an inconvenience, not a rupture, not a loss. I played it again. "Where are you? We're about to start." He sounded like someone whose babysitter canceled, not like a son missing his mother at his wedding. Inside, the RSVP card was still taped to the fridge, its loopy handwriting now bitter in its optimism. "Happily attending." I stared at it for a long time. There had been a time when I believed it, when I pictured myself in the front row, misty-eyed and proud, adjusting my shawl as he said his vows. But the seat wasn't mine. Not really. It never had been. Another message buzzed in. "Tasha, this time. Hey, we can't hold things up. Please just come through the vendor entrance. We've got the kids waiting." No question, no worry, just a directive. I exhaled slowly. The air felt different, lighter somehow, tinged with a strange calm. Not vindication. Something deeper. Something settled. I thought of Pastor Yvonne's words from the night before, now etched into my chest. They had a choice. So do you. I turned off the phone, not out of defiance, out of clarity. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't explain. They had made their choices, each one deliberate, each one loud. And now, so had I. I stepped inside, slid the balcony door shut, and walked through my living room without looking back. By 5 p.m., I was back in my home office, the kind of room that still smelled faintly of lemon polish and old books. I'd turned the ringer off and opened my laptop, signing into my Wells Fargo account with a stillness I didn't know I possessed. No shaking hands, no second guesses. There it was, the $1,000 transfer, scheduled and pending for midnight. A wedding gift, they called it, meant to arrive like clockwork the morning after the ceremony, wrapped in zeros instead of ribbon. I hovered over the transaction for a beat, then clicked, "Cancel." Just like that, it was done. Confirmation appeared on the screen. "Your transfer has been successfully canceled." A Zelle request popped up minutes later. as if Tasha had known instinctively the well might stop giving. "Hey, Miss T, I think you forgot the wedding gift. Can you send via Zelle?" Flying money! The emoji stung more than the message. That little dancing money symbol, tossed in like confetti, made the whole thing feel like a joke at my expense. I took a screenshot, then closed the app. Outside the window, dusk settled in over the tops of parked cars and apartment balconies. Somewhere, likely in the rented ballroom with champagne flutes clinking, they were celebrating a wedding I wasn't missed at least not in the way that mattered. There had been no pause in the program, no empty chair draped in fabric to honor the absence, just a brief flurry of calls, and then a pivot, just like always. I sat back in my desk chair and let the quiet hold me. The edges of it were soft, not cold. I had always thought withholding would feel cruel, like punishment. But this was not cruelty. It was clarity, the kind you earn. I sent a quick message to Edward, my banker. Transfer canceled. Please confirm reversal and close remaining authorizations. No further access. He replied within minutes. Confirmed. All pending transfers reversed. Standing authorizations cleared. There was no fanfare, no big confrontation, just a line drawn. For the first time in months, I breathed deep in that room without bracing for the next ask. The Monday after the wedding, I walked into Kinko's with a tote bag that no longer held toys or wipes, but something far heavier. Proof. The clerk behind the counter barely looked up until I slid the USB drive across the glass. All the files are in there, I said quietly. I'll need 2 full packets printed and collated. Color, please. Stapled, not bound. He nodded, clicking into the folder while I retrieved the manila envelope from my purse. Inside were the screenshots, the message thread from the group chat, the mock vendor badge, the Zelle request with the emoji. Next came bank statements, highlighted transfer records, and a spreadsheet I'd created the night before, line by line, month by month, every dollar sent since June. Lastly, the call log from Jamal's missed calls and the transcript I'd typed out from the Zoom recording. It wasn't a weapon, it was a mirror. Tasha's voice echoed in my head. We can't hold things up. As I watched the printer hum to life. The machine stacked each sheet with mechanical precision, indifferent to the ache behind every word. Still, the pages felt right, clean, honest, undeniable. Want a folder with that? The clerk asked. I looked up. His name tag read, Dana, mid-30s, neat beard, gentle eyes. Yes, I said. 2. Something sturdy. While he packed the documents, I studied the plastic counter divider between us. Finger smudged, scratched, ordinary. How many women before me had stood here doing the same thing? Printing custody paperwork, housing complaints, evidence of betrayal. I didn't feel unique. I felt joined, somehow, to a lineage of quiet reckonings. Dana slid the folders across with care. If you ever need a notarized copy, there's a UPS store 2 blocks over. They're good folks. I nodded, grateful not just for the tip, but for the way he'd said it. Without pity, without curiosity, just respect. Outside, the air was crisp for early spring. I held the folders to my chest like something sacred. This wasn't revenge. This was record-keeping. In the wedding photos they'd likely already uploaded, I wouldn't appear. My name wouldn't be tagged. My face wouldn't be included in any album. But these documents? They held my story. The one they tried to flatten. The one they hoped would stay silent. Now, it had a paper trail. And soon, it would have witnesses. By Thursday, the folders sat neatly on the conference table in the lower hall of Trinity Community Church. The light filtering through the tall stained glass gave everything a warm hue, like truth had color, and it was amber. Pastor Yvonne sat at the head of the table, hands folded, glasses perched low on her nose. She didn't speak at first. She just opened the folder, turned each page slowly, and let the silence do what it does best, demand honesty. To her left was Edward from Wells Fargo, freshly off his lunch break, still in his suit. His hands were clasped over his knee, posture stiff with quiet loyalty. He'd printed extra copies of the transfer records, circled dates where J&T had pulled funds the day after baby shower invites were sent. Patterns clear, he murmured. Camille, my neighbor from 2 floors up, slid in a moment later. She wore her usual track jacket and carried a manila folder of her own. HOA bylaws and Jamal's co-signer application, she said, tapping the papers. You signed off on that lease, gave them credibility, and now they're pretending they did it alone? She shook her head, jaw tight. Not on my watch. I hadn't planned to say much, but watching them read, the furrow of Yvonne's brow, the tight line of Edward's mouth, Camille's sharp inhale, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Not joy, not vindication, just steadiness. Like finally being seen without having to raise my voice. Tasha had posted another cryptic status that morning. Some folks can't handle being left out. Heal, ma'am. The kind of vague cruelty designed to look benign to strangers. Camille had screenshotted it before I even saw it. She thought this was cute, she said, sliding her phone across the table. Yvonne looked at me over her glasses. You ready to draw a line? I nodded. No access to your condo. No more financial assistance. Written, witnessed, filed. I already have the draft, I said, and I'll notarize it tomorrow. Edward placed his hand gently on the packet between us. Then you're doing this right. Paper to power. That's how you shift a story. We sat a moment longer, 3 allies in a sun-warmed room, not plotting revenge, but affirming reality. April 1st arrived with a chill that bit at the back of my neck as I walked into the notary's office, a slim envelope tucked under my arm. The receptionist gave me the kind of smile reserved for people doing hard things. Brief, polite, knowing. I sat across from a man named Greer, calm and methodical, who walked me through each section of the letter I'd drafted. Termination of financial support, revocation of cosigner privileges, denial of condo access, effective immediately. I had included the dates, the dollar amounts, the authorization codes. It read more like a contract than a goodbye, but that's what was needed. When he slid the signature page toward me, my hand didn't tremble. I signed with a blue ink pen I brought from home, the same one I'd used for Jamal's first FAFSA. As the notary stamp clicked against the paper, something inside me settled. Not pride, not triumph, just completion. A door once opened too wide, now gently and firmly closed. Afterward, I walked across Georgia Avenue to the small cafe where Darnell Moore, the HOA officer, waited with a copy of Jamal and Tasha's application. Camille had already given him a heads up. I've filed the revocation, I said, sliding the notarized letter across the table. Effective today, I am no longer co-signing. I will not be liable for fees, access, or guarantees on their tenancy. Darnell flipped through the packet slowly, nodding. We'll amend the file and notify the board. You'll be removed as co-applicant. No one can use your name to secure access moving forward. His professionalism was a balm. No judgment, no disbelief, just respect for process, and, more importantly, for boundaries. He tapped the corner of the page. You've been more than generous. This, he said, gesturing to the folder, is overdue. I sipped my tea, the warmth steadying my spine. It was love, I replied softly. That's why it lasted longer than it should have. He didn't respond right away, just nodded again and let the weight of that truth sit with us both. By the time I walked home, a light drizzle had begun, spotting my coat and darkening the pavement. But I didn't hurry. Every step back to my building felt lighter. Sunday afternoon arrived draped in a deceptive calm, the kind of quiet that hums before a storm. I had just settled into the living room with a cup of chamomile and the newspaper when the doorbell rang. Twice. Then again, fast and insistent. I didn't need to check the camera. I already knew. When I opened the door, Jamal stood there holding his daughter, a half-packed diaper bag slung over his shoulder. Tasha stood a step behind, arms crossed, her lips pressed into a smile so thin it barely existed. Hey, Ma, Jamal said, shifting the baby. We just need a quick favor. Can you watch her for an hour? We've got a last-minute showing across town. Tasha chimed in, voice honeyed and sharp. This is what family does, right? I didn't move. Behind them, the hallway smelled faintly of floor polish and warm takeout. I noticed her heels, too high for a casual errand. His blazer, too crisp. They weren't headed to a showing. They were headed to be seen. I already told you, I said quietly, gesturing to the copy of the letter taped to the inside of my door. I've withdrawn. No more child care. No more co-signing. No more exceptions. Tasha's expression cracked. You're really going to turn your back on your granddaughter? This isn't about her, I said, leveling my gaze. This is about how you treat the people who raise you, then expect them to disappear when they're no longer convenient. Jamal stepped forward. Mom, you're being dramatic? No, I replied, my voice steady. I'm being done. Camille's balcony door creaked open above us. She stepped out casually, holding a watering can, but her presence was intentional. She caught my eye, nodded once. Tasha noticed and turned sharply. Is this what we're doing now? Making a scene for the neighbors? You rang my bell, I said. I'm just answering it. The baby fussed in Jamal's arms. He bounced her, sighed, then stepped back. I guess we'll figure it out. You always could, I said. You just didn't want to. I closed the door softly, not slammed, not shoved, just shut. From the inside, I could still hear the murmuring. Tasha's irritation, Jamal's deflated tone, then footsteps fading. I leaned against the doorframe and breathed in the quiet. April 15th, the Silver Spring Community Room buzzed with polite murmurs and the faint clink of folding chairs. HOA meetings were rarely exciting, but that night, tension hung in the air like humidity before rain. Darnell sat at the front, his gavel resting beside the agenda. A laminated sign read, Monthly Board Review, Residency Petitions. I arrived 5 minutes before start time, folder in hand, scarf neatly knotted at my neck. Camille had saved me a seat near the aisle. They're already here, she whispered, nodding toward the second row. There they were. Jamal in an open collar, trying to appear composed. Tasha beside him, her smile practiced, that special kind of gracious she reserved for moments when eyes were watching. They didn't see me enter. Darnell opened the meeting with a brief roll call, then gestured toward Jamal and Tasha. You're requesting tenant approval for the Colesville unit, correct? Jamal stood. Yes, sir. We've been living there for several months. We're just finalizing the paperwork for official tenant status. Darnell flipped through a folder. There's an existing co-signer on the application, Teresa Williams. Is she present? I rose slowly. Tasha turned, her smile faltering the moment her eyes met mine. I'm Teresa Williams, I said evenly. I've come to withdraw my endorsement. Officially and with documentation. The room hushed. I walked to the front and handed Darnell the folder. Notarized revocation letter, bank statement copies, HOA policy excerpts. Every page marked, every date aligned. Tasha's voice cut through the quiet. This is extremely unnecessary. We've got a baby. Darnell raised a hand. We'll give everyone a chance to speak. But this board operates on policy, not pressure. Jamal looked stunned, as if realizing for the first time that this wasn't a family squabble. It was governance. I turned to face the room, not them. I supported my son and his wife financially and legally, including co-signing their application. That support has been revoked. The documents reflect that. I'm asking this board to honor that boundary. Camille nodded from her seat, arms crossed. Darnell adjusted his glasses. Thank you, Ms. Williams. We'll review the materials now. I returned to my chair. Jamal wouldn't look at me. Tasha whispered something behind her hand. But their silence didn't reach me. The folder was on the table. The facts were in the room. Darnell called a 5-minute recess, during which the board members huddled behind the folding partition. Jamal sat stiffly in his chair, fists clenched on his knees, eyes darting from the clock to the floor. Tasha scrolled her phone like she was above the room, but the tension in her jaw gave her away. When the board returned, Darnell resumed his seat, glanced down at the folder, then looked straight at me. Ms. Williams, would you like to make your packet available to the other residents present? I stood without hesitation. Yes, I brought enough copies. I walked the aisles, handing each board member a set, paper clipped and tabbed for clarity. Transfers, messages, the vendor badge screenshot, call logs, the HOA co-signature form with my handwritten initials. No commentary, just evidence. I returned to my seat as they read. Jamal turned toward me, his voice low. Mom, you really doing this here? I met his gaze. You left me no choice. Tasha muttered. You always needed to be the center of things. I didn't respond. The pages spoke louder than either of them ever could. A board member leaned in to whisper something to Darnell, who nodded slowly. Then he addressed the room. This board has reviewed the application, the revocation, and the supplemental materials provided tonight. Based on the documentation and the withdrawal of cosigner authorization, we cannot approve this tenancy as submitted. Tasha gasped. Jamal's face drained of color. Darnell continued. The board respects property rights and clear boundaries. Ms. Williams, prior support no longer applies, and under our bylaws, tenant approval requires a verified guarantor if the applicants lack qualifying credit or income. As of now, this application does not meet that threshold. He didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He just stated it plainly, with the finality of a door clicking shut. I felt no surge of victory, just relief, like an exhale I'd been holding for months. Tasha leaned in to whisper again, but Jamal didn't respond. He stared at the table, unmoving. Camille squeezed my hand lightly. I gathered the spare folders, tucking the edges in neatly. As I slid them back into my tote, I noticed one small tear on the top corner. I ran my thumb over it once, then let it be. The papers had done their work, and for the first time in a long while, so had I. Without apology, without permission. That same night, I walked home with the quiet confidence of someone who no longer owed the world an explanation. The streets glistened under the faint remains of rain, each puddle catching amber reflections from the streetlights above. I passed the corner florist, now closed, its windows still glowing with leftover wedding arrangements, white peonies and blush roses I once imagined holding at my son's ceremony. The keys jingled in my coat pocket as I approached the building, the ones I had carried for years, but they weren't the only set anymore. Dale, the locksmith, arrived 20 minutes after I called. A tall man with gentle eyes and a canvas tool bag, he didn't ask questions, just nodded at the door and got to work. The quiet clicks of his tools were oddly soothing, like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. Inside, I stood barefoot in the foyer as he replaced both the main and the deadbolt. The hallway light flickered above us. When he finished, he handed me the fresh brass keys, still warm from his palm. "Test them out," he said. I slid one into the new lock and turned it smoothly. It clicked with a crispness that made something inside me settle. "That'll be $212, he added, holding out a carbon paper receipt. I paid in cash, folded the slip in half and tucked it into the side pocket of my purse. A small proof of a larger decision. As Dale left, I closed the door behind him. Not slammed, not dramatic, just shut. This time, with a lock I'd chosen, one no one else had access to, a boundary made literal. Jamal texted me not long after, "You'll regret this." It arrived with no punctuation, no warmth, just that flat, final warning meant to provoke. I blocked the number, not because I hated him, but because I needed the silence more than I needed the noise of his disappointment. I stood in the middle of my home and looked around, not for intrusion, but for reassurance. My framed photos still lined the hallway. My shawl, beadwork still intact, lay folded across the back of the armchair. The silver heels were back in their box, untouched but unburdened. The baby's toys had been donated. The wedding calendar cleared. The extra house key, once kept in a drawer for emergencies, now tossed in the trash. And the new keys? I hung them on a hook beside the door. My house, my peace, my terms.